I had been married to my husband for over 40 years, raised his children, and helped pay all the mortgages and bills. On Mother's Day, he gave me a candle from a sale, with the price tag still on it. Later that day, I found out that he had given another woman in town a brand new luxury car. At that moment, something changed in me, and I decided that if I was invisible to him, I would use that invisibility to end the game on my own terms. This is an incredible story of betrayal. Sit back and relax, and I'll tell it from the beginning. Betrayal doesn't care how many birthdays you've stacked. Raymond and I had been married a little over 40 years, long enough for the photographs on our mantle to fade at the edges. I taught third grade until last spring, the kind of teacher who kept band-aids, stickers, and a bottomless patience in the top drawer. I helped raise his two from a previous marriage, signed permission slips, stitched Halloween costumes, and kept our roof paid for even when the shingles looked like they might quit before I did. Every bill, every list, every late-night load of laundry, you get the picture. Mother's Day dawned polite and bright, the kind of cheerful morning that makes even the cranky birds pretend to whistle. I padded into the kitchen in those fuzzy slippers my sister says make me look like a house cat. The kettle rattled. The sun slipped across the laminate like a gossip. Our old bungalow gave its usual sighs. The familiar tick of the clock, the rate of light through the thin curtains, the cabinet hinge that squeaks because I still haven't found the oil in the garage. I set out my favorite mug, the chipped one with the lighthouse, and buttered toast while the radio murmured about traffic I had no intention of joining. Now I'm no diva. I wasn't expecting diamonds or a parade. But 40 years of team effort deserves a little thought, doesn't it? A card scribbled with something that sounds like my husband knows who I am. A plant for the porch. A photo in a frame we didn't get free with a coupon. Raymond's work at the car lot keeps him in a perpetual hustle. He's always got just one more thing to do. Always one more customer who doesn't know what they want until they see it. I know the rhythm of his stories, the way he jingles his keys when he's about to make an exit, the way he calls me kiddo when he wants me to stop asking follow-up questions. He strutted in around 10:30, later than he'd said, smelling like cold air and dealership coffee. In his hand was a little crinkled bag from the discount place by the laundromat, the one that sells garden gloves, holiday candy in July, and mystery socks. He held it out like he was presenting a trophy. "For you," he said, with that salesman smile that never quite reaches the eyes. Inside was a candle. Not a nice one in a heavy glass jar with a wooden wick that crackles, mind you. This was a clearance bin special in a dented tin. The label read Coastal Sunrise, which, near as I can tell, is marketing for someone spilled a vanilla shake in a tire store. The price sticker, big, fluorescent, and bossy, was still slapped right on top. The total, circled in black marker, might as well have been printed in bold. Under the lid, the wick leaned like it had already given up, and the wax had a bubble the size of a pea set dead in the middle, like a dimple on a cheap smile. He said something about the line being long and the clerk being slow, then kissed my forehead the way you tap a lamp to see if it's plugged in. "Gotta run back out," he added, already turning. "Busy day." Keys jingle. Shoes squeak. Door thunk. And me there holding Coastal Sunrise like it was a newborn hope. I pasted on my practiced wife face, "You know the one," and thanked him. Polite, warm, not too much, because heaven forbid I embarrass a man with gratitude. Inside, though, I felt it. The tiniest snap, the kind you hear when a freezer bag seal finally gives way. It wasn't fireworks. It was a cold, clean click. I set the candle on the kitchen table next to the placemat I quilted years ago from scraps of our kids' old t-shirts. Camp logos, talent shows, a stain of grape juice that never did come out. Funny how the homemade things last. I poured more coffee and studied that little tin like it might confess under pressure. The lid left a smudge on my fingers. The scent skittered through the room, sugary and thin, the olfactory equivalent of flattery. I thought about all the Mother's Days before. The macaroni necklaces, the scribbled poems, the burnt toast carried in on a cookie sheet with 2 pot holders and enormous pride. Small, sincere things. My classroom kids used to bring me dandelions with dirty stems and whispers like secrets. Somewhere along the line, the gestures got cheaper while the expectations got heavier. 40 years is a long stretch of Tuesday nights and car inspections, and I'll get to it. I patched jeans and fences and the place between us that phrase when you don't protect it. I learned to live with the towel he never hangs back up and the way he tells a story in circles like he's trying to sell it to himself. I don't need grand gestures. I need to feel seen. And that tin, with its wobble of wax and bossy sticker, felt like the opposite of being seen. It felt like being checked off a list between windshield wipers and a pack of gum. I carried the candle to the sink and wiped away the price sticker with a damp cloth. It left that gummy residue that attracts every floating crumb in the county. Figures. The label refused to sit straight again, so it looked tipsy no matter how I smoothed it. Coastal Sunrise. I read aloud and laughed, one of those small, astonished laughs that shows a little tooth. If there'd been an ocean in our house, it would have been the puddle under the leaky fridge line, and the sunrise would have been the light bulb in the hallway trying its best. I set the tin back in the center of the table like a paperweight for my patience, and took my toast to the back steps. The yard smelled like cut grass and last night's rain, and the peonies had finally decided to be dramatic about blooming. A neighbor waved. I waved back with the toast. In that quiet moment, the hinge inside me settled into a new position. I didn't cry. I didn't make a speech. I just sat there nibbling crusts, feeling the shape of a thought I couldn't name yet, steady as the tick of that kitchen clock. 40 years and this little shiny apology of a candle was what I was worth? I carried my second cup of tea outside that afternoon, the good china mug with the chip on the rim that I keep meaning to throw away but never do. The garden looked decent for once. Hostas finally filling in, peonies showing off in their loud pink skirts, and the little birdbath glinting in the sun even though it always tilts to one side like it's been hitting the bottle. I settled into my wicker chair with the latest community newsletter. I don't always read it, but sometimes the yard sale listings or the church announcements give me a laugh. The newsletter had its usual hodgepodge. A recipe for rhubarb pie, which I'll never make because I can't trust myself not to burn the crust. A half-page ad for someone's new dog walking business, and photos from the town's spring fling. I flipped through lazily, enjoying the breeze and thinking about nothing in particular, until one picture nearly stopped my heart mid-beat. There she was. Lila ***. Not a close friend, but I knew of her. The yoga instructor with the little studio downtown. Always seen wearing those stretchy pants that look like they cost more than my monthly water bill. Blonde hair that never looked frizzy even in August humidity. Early 30s maybe. The kind of woman who posts inspirational quotes about balance, while sipping smoothies that cost $12 a glass. And in the picture, she was standing next to a brand new convertible. White shiny with that smug fresh off the lot gleam. She was holding up the keys, practically glowing, while leaning on the hood like it was her new throne. The caption underneath? *best surprise ever. Some men really know how to treat a woman right. I felt my stomach do a little flip. Not the excited kind. The I knew it kind. See, my husband sells cars. Always has. The smell of leather seats and motor oil clings to him like a cologne he never asked for. He's constantly off at business meetings, which, translated into wife language, means don't ask questions and expect leftovers for dinner. I'd ignored that rhythm for years, convincing myself that selling cars just meant unpredictable hours. But staring at that photo, the dots connected themselves. A shiny new convertible, a yoga instructor half his age, a caption practically screaming about a special someone. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to solve that puzzle. I set the newsletter on my lap and stared at my garden without really seeing it. The candle he'd handed me that morning was still sitting inside on the kitchen table, smelling faintly of fake vanilla, probably strong enough to knock over the cat if we'd had one. And meanwhile, he was out there handing another woman the keys to something that cost more than I made in an entire year of teaching kids how to add fractions. I picked the newsletter back up just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks. No. There she was again in another photo, hugging the car door like it was a long-lost friend. A friend with leather upholstery and heated seats. I let out a laugh, sharp and hollow. Not because it was funny, though if it had been someone else's story maybe it would have been, but because it was so absurd. Me, 40 years in, loyal to the bone, buttering his toast every morning, and I get a candle with a clearance sticker still glued on the lid. She, who wasn't even a mother, gets a convertible as a Mother's Day gift. I took a long sip of my tea which had gone lukewarm and thought, well, isn't that just perfect? Life has a twisted sense of humor, and apparently I was the punchline that day. After seeing that photo in the newsletter, I couldn't bring myself to do anything useful. I tried to weed around the peonies, but the dandelions looked too smug. I tried to fold laundry, but every towel felt like an accusation. Finally, I marched myself to the desk where our old computer sits humming like a cranky refrigerator. If Raymond thought 40 years of teaching kids how to show your work hadn't prepared me for detective duty, he was sorely mistaken. I pulled up the online banking page, squinting at the screen like it was written in code. My hands shook a little as I typed in the password. I had to try twice because my fingers hit the wrong keys. Once the account opened, I scrolled through the recent charges. At first, it was the usual utilities, the grocery store, the pharmacy where I buy my arthritis cream. Then the pattern started. There were payments to a retreat center 3 towns over. Not just once, but 3 times in the past few months. Places that promise restorative weekends, with massages and green juices. The kind of trips I used to say I'd like to try someday, and he'd wave off as too expensive. Next, I saw charges from boutique clothing stores I've never set foot in. Shops with names that sound like French perfumes and price tags that could fund my classroom supply list for a year. And then jewelry stores. Not the sensible department store counters where I pick out a little chain on sale. These were from jewelers downtown where the windows sparkle like Christmas morning. And the clerks wear suits just to hand you a receipt. And there it was. Clear as day. Monthly payments to the dealership. Not just any dealership, his dealership. The car on Lila's newsletter photo wasn't just shiny, it was on our tab. I scrolled further, my jaw tightening with every line. The math started adding itself in my head like an old chalkboard problem. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. A steady bleed of dollars that should have been paying for repairs on the roof or boosting my retirement account. For months, longer probably, Raymond had been funneling money straight into Lila's new lifestyle. Retreats, clothes, jewelry, the convertible. It was all spelled out in black and white, no room for excuses or spin. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles. A younger me might have cried, but the tears just wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something colder, steadier, like a frost creeping across the ground, hardening everything it touched. He wanted to treat me like I was invisible? Fine. But invisible doesn't mean powerless. If anything, it makes you harder to see coming. I closed the laptop, smoothed my skirt, and poured myself another cup of tea. The candle still sat on the kitchen table, its tin glinting in the light. I almost laughed. That cheap little thing had no idea it was about to be the most expensive mistake of Raymond's life. The morning after my little financial excavation, I marched myself straight to the bank. I didn't even bother with lipstick, which tells you just how serious I was. The lobby smelled faintly of copier toner and lemon polish, and the fake ficus in the corner still had a dusty bough from Christmas hanging off one branch. Behind the desk sat Janet, who had known me for years, back when she was a teller just learning to count stacks of 20s without licking her finger first. She's one of those women who always has her hair done, and her nails painted a shade called something like Rose Mirage. We chatted 100 times about everything from the school board elections to who makes the best potato salad at the church picnic. When I asked about our accounts, her smile faltered just for a second. She clicked around on her computer, nodding and murmuring in that professional way bankers do, but her eyes flicked up at me with something between pity and confirmation. That look told me more than the numbers on the screen ever could. "Clara," she said softly, leaning a little closer so the couple at the next desk wouldn't overhear. "I think you should talk to a lawyer." Then she reached into her drawer and slipped me a business card like it was contraband. Evelyn Moore, family law attorney. The tagline read, * protecting what matters most. * I almost laughed, because apparently what mattered most these days was keeping my husband from bankrupting me with yoga retreats and shiny cars. That afternoon, I called and set up an appointment. Evelyn's office was nothing like I expected. No intimidating wood paneling or brass lamps. Instead, it was warm and tidy, with soft-colored walls and a bowl of mints on the table. Evelyn herself was brisk but kind, maybe in her 50s, with the calm eyes of someone who's seen more marriages crash and burn than a soap opera writer. She didn't waste time with platitudes. After I explained what I'd found, Lila, the convertible, the mystery charges, she tapped her pen against her notepad and got straight to it. "The good news," she said, "is that the credit card debts are in his name only. That means you aren't responsible for them." I blinked at her. "You're telling me that all those bills, the car payments, the jewelry, the fancy spa trips, that's all on him?" She nodded. "Yes. And your pension from teaching? That's in your name. Untouchable. Same with the inheritance from your mother. You're in a stronger position than you think. But, she leaned forward, we'll need to be careful. Very careful. She laid out a plan in neat, sharp lines. What to document. What to leave alone. What to gather quietly, like puzzle pieces slipping into place. No grand confrontations, no yelling matches. Just slow, steady preparation. By the time I left her office, I felt taller somehow, like someone had adjusted my spine. For the first time in years, the tight knot in my chest loosened. That night, when I slid between the sheets, I didn't toss and turn, replaying Raymond's excuses. Instead, I let myself drift into the first truly sound rest I'd had in decades. Once Evelyn gave me my marching orders, I knew what I had to do. I dusted off an old skill every long-married woman keeps tucked away, the art of pretending everything is just fine. I became Sweet Clara again, the one who laughed at jokes I'd already heard 100 times and asked polite questions about car sales like they were thrilling tales of heroism. I cooked Raymond's favorite meals, the ones I'd stopped bothering with because he usually came home late. Meatloaf with extra ketchup glaze, mashed potatoes whipped just right, even the green bean casserole his mother used to make. He ate it all like he was doing me a favor. I smiled and refilled his tea. Inside, I was counting steps like a chess player 3 moves ahead. One evening, I even went into the cedar chest and pulled out the old quilt I stitched when the kids were small. Bits of their outgrown clothes patched into squares. Dinosaurs, polka dots, and a faded corner from Raymond's old bowling shirt. I spread it across the dining table like we were a Norman Rockwell painting. He barely noticed, but it reminded me of who I used to be. Before I let too busy, and maybe later eat away at me. Over dessert one night, pecan pie from the diner because I've never mastered pie crust, I dropped the bait. With the market the way it is, I said casually, maybe we should update our insurance papers, just to protect what we've built. He didn't even pause, just kept sawing at his slice. Good thinking. Leave them on my desk when they come. That was it. No suspicion, no questions. If it wasn't about a sale or a golf score, Raymond never gave it his full attention. That had been the rhythm of our marriage. I handled the boring details, he assumed everything was taken care of. For once, that dynamic was going to work in my favor. A week later, Evelyn handed me a thick stack of papers. On top, they looked like dull financial updates, insurance adjustments, beneficiary confirmations. Buried inside, however, were the real treasures. Legal transfers, ironclad and binding. My name only on the house. Sole rights to my pension. Confirmation that my inheritance remained separate. And most satisfying of all, statements that ensured any debts tied to his little spending spree would fall squarely on his shoulders. I set the packet on his desk, complete with a sticky note in my neat teacher's handwriting. Asterisk, sign and return by Friday. Asterisk, that night when I peeked in, the pile was already in the outbox, every page covered with his confident scrawl. He hadn't read a word. I stood there for a long moment looking at those signatures. 40 years of dismissing me as low maintenance. And he just signed away the very ground under his feet. I didn't feel triumphant yet, but I did feel steady, like the first brick had been laid in a foundation that would finally belong to me. For the next 3 months, I lived 2 entirely different lives. To Raymond, I was the dutiful, cheerful wife again. I asked him how the car lot was doing, I ironed his shirts, and I even started packing his lunches like I used to when we were newly married. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, a little bag of chips, and a note that said, asterisk, have a great day. Asterisk, he didn't even notice the notes. He never commented, just crumpled them into the trash. But that was fine because they weren't for him. They were for me, proof that I could play the part convincingly right down to the tiniest detail. Behind the curtain, though, I was building an exit strategy. I opened a new bank account in just my name, the first account I'd had alone since my 20s. Walking out of that bank with my paperwork in hand felt like slipping into a pair of comfortable shoes I'd forgotten I owned. I redirected my pension checks there, slowly and quietly, so the transition wouldn't draw attention. Next came the storage unit. It was small, but I didn't need much space. I rented it under the pretense of storing classroom supplies, for some volunteer work. A story I told anyone who asked. In truth, I was ferrying out the things that mattered most to me. The quilt my grandmother stitched by hand, the photo albums that held the proof of my entire adult life, the rocking chair where I used to read bedtime stories, and the jewelry I'd inherited from my mother. Each trip was carefully planned. A box or two tucked into the trunk, never enough to draw suspicion if Raymond glanced in. The rhythm became almost comical. By day, I was June Cleaver with a smile and a spatula. By night, or whenever he left for a business dinner, I was a one-woman moving crew, tucking my past into cardboard boxes and labeling them in handwriting only I could decipher. And through it all, that candle sat in the center of the kitchen counter. At first, I couldn't look at it without my jaw tightening. It was so small, so cheap, so insulting. But after a while, something shifted. It stopped hurting and started fueling me. Each time I passed it, I'd give it a glance and think, asterisk, this is going to cost him more than any car on that lot. This little waxy joke will be his undoing. Asterisk. I dusted it once a week like it was a prized possession, just to make sure it gleamed in the sunlight. If Raymond noticed, he said nothing. He rarely noticed anything unless it had a shiny hood and a financing plan. That suited me just fine. His blindness was my greatest asset. By the end of those 3 months, I had my safety net in place, my belongings tucked away, and my account secure. Outwardly, our life looked picture-perfect again. Inwardly, I was preparing to vanish like smoke. The woman who once believed a clearance bin candle was all she was worth was packing her worth into boxes, one careful trip at a time. Friday morning started like any other. Raymond stomped around the bedroom, tossing shirts into his suitcase as if we owned a laundromat instead of a closet. He claimed he had a dealership conference out of town. I didn't argue. I'd already seen the charges on his credit card. Spa services, a yoga retreat package, and reservations at a lodge that advertises itself as a sanctuary for body and spirit. That was no conference. That was Lila. I stood at the dresser, sipping my coffee, and watched him pack silk ties and polished shoes as if he were about to negotiate with royalty. He barely looked at me while he zipped the suitcase shut. "Don't wait up," he muttered, jingling his keys. I gave him a sweet smile and wished him good luck with his networking. The irony nearly choked me. As soon as his truck rumbled down the street, I set my mug in the sink, wiped the counter for good measure, and called the movers. I'd scheduled them weeks before, timing everything to the minute. By noon, 3 men in blue shirts were carrying out the furniture that mattered to me. The antique dining set I bought with my own savings, the piano my mother left me, the rocking chair that had cradled babies and bad days alike. Box after box, carefully labeled, disappeared into their truck. By afternoon, the house looked altered. Not empty, but different, like it was missing its heartbeat. Anyone glancing around might think it was still a home, but I knew the soul of it had been packed into cardboard and driven to storage. When the last box was gone, the movers tipped their caps and left me standing in a silence that rang louder than Raymond's heavy footsteps ever had. The only thing left on the counter was that candle. I lit it, just for spite, and let its sickly vanilla scent drift through the kitchen. That evening, I sat down at the table with a sheet of paper and my favorite pen. My hands were steady, almost calm as the words flowed. Asterisk, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. You gave her a car and me a candle, but the candle burned brighter than you realized. 3 months ago, you signed away the house, my pension, and everything I earned. You're keeping the debt, the lies, and her. I hope Lila is worth it. Asterisk. I folded the letter neatly, set it beside the candle, and placed the pen across the top like punctuation. For a moment, I looked around the kitchen. The chip tile Raymond never fixed, the clock ticking faithfully, the quilt I had spread on the table earlier that week. 40 years of my life lived inside these walls, and yet it felt like someone else's story. I picked up my purse, slipped on my sensible shoes, and walked out the front door. I didn't lock it behind me. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. The house belonged to me now, but I no longer belonged to it. And as I pulled away, the faint glow of that little candle flickered in the kitchen window, the most expensive flame Raymond would ever light. 6 months later, I was living in a bright little apartment with windows that caught the morning sun just right. It wasn't big, but it was mine, every last square foot of it. The first thing I did after moving in was buy plants. Real ones. Not the dusty fake fern that sat on top of our old entertainment center for 20 years, but actual living greenery. Spider plants, a fiddle leaf fig that looked like it was auditioning for a magazine spread, and a row of herbs in little clay pots lined up on the windowsill. For the first time in decades, I had the time to water them, trim them, and even talk to them if the mood struck. The house had sold quickly. The market was hot, Evelyn worked her magic, and after all was said and done, I walked away with just over $300,000 in my pocket, not counting my pension. When she called to tell me the numbers, she said, "Clara, this is one of the cleanest cases I've ever handled. Ironclad." I nearly dropped the phone from laughing. Who would have thought? Me, the woman who got a clearance bin candle for Mother's Day, had pulled off something so tidy the lawyer herself was impressed. As for Raymond, well, life caught up with him. Word around town was that the debts from his little shopping sprees came due faster than he could juggle them. The car lot wasn't doing so hot, either. Too many competitors, not enough customers. He filed for bankruptcy, and the cherry on top? Lila left. Apparently, the yogi lifestyle didn't include hanging around for bounce checks and canceled retreats. I didn't gloat, not really. It was more like watching the ending of a movie you already knew was coming. Predictable but still satisfying. The real twist came at the grocery store. I was in the produce aisle, examining tomatoes like they were gemstones, when I heard someone clear his throat. I looked up and there he was. Raymond. Except he wasn't the Raymond I remembered. He looked older. His hair thinner, his shoulders slumped. He seemed smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. He tried to smile. "Clara," he said, "you look good." His voice cracked a little, like he was surprised at his own words. I stood there holding a tomato in one hand and thought, yes, I do look good. Not because of a new diet or a fancy outfit, but because I was free. I wasn't carrying him anymore. Then he said it. "Maybe we could have coffee sometime. Just to talk." I looked him straight in the eye and shook my head. "No, Raymond. I don't think that's a good idea." His face fell, but I didn't soften. I set the tomato in my cart, turned and walked away. I didn't look back. For once, I wasn't the one left standing there with nothing but scraps. Back at my apartment that evening, I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the window with my plants, and watched the sunset behind the rooftops. For the first time in 40 years, I wasn't someone's caretaker, someone's afterthought, or someone's fool. I was just Clara. Independent, steady, and finally blooming in my own right. And you know what? That little apartment smelled better than any candle ever could.
Share your thoughts in the comments. If you discovered your spouse was hiding financial secrets, what would be your first step? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.